We're going to talk about anxiety, what it is a little bit, what an anxious attachment is, because that is very related. I'm a EMDR trained attachment therapist and theorist, so I love attachment. It is the root of so many things. Okay. We're going to talk about highly sensitive, what that means, what fear and avoidances are, why we avoid, why we have safety behaviors, they're called. And then we'll go over tools and emotional coaching and regulation. So of course it's like, okay, the point is we always want to know is like, okay, how can I regulate my kid's emotions? Well, you can't. So they've got to do that, but you can coach them and you can help teach them in regulating their own. And that's the goal, is for them to learn how to get to their frontal lobes on their own, and with a little bit of coaching and help. But so guess what? I added a C to my C's of the brain. I added my own C, which is the celebrate. This came to me as a really good 5th C. So I like C's and D's. So C for my, but this is what is super, super important. And this is how I teach. So first we have to have clarity. So it's just educational. We have to have clarity on what things are. We define them, label them is really 90%. If we know what's going on, if we know what illness we're trying to fight, then you know how to treat it. But and then we have to connect the dots and have connection. So if we connect the dots, here we go, right? We can connect what this is connected to. So it helps us label and clarify. And then we have control, then we can find power, and then we can close it out. Now, closure is like way, way, way later. It really is most of the time. We very rarely get to full closure. And it's not letting go. It's not like fixing anything. It's closure. So it's a different word than like, oh, let's just see how, we're doing here with, hold on. And so it's like, okay, how do we get to closure, and how do we say, hey, this is, I understand this now, but it's not like, it's not like it's gone, but I have some clarity, control over it. I can manage it. I can do all those things about whatever it is, right? So it's almost like comfort, and we can just soothe that, and we can say, okay, it's not disturbing anymore. It happened, or it's happening, but it's not as disturbing. And then we can celebrate. And so that's the reward system. That's how we can say, okay, we've got understanding and closure and all this stuff, and now we can celebrate for the hard work. So if that helps, that's the kind of, the brain has to go through these, and we go through these constantly every day. We celebrate when we're done with an hour of work, we're done with school, where we can celebrate by, getting a very accomplished day. So see, this is like every single day that we do, we have to have this kind of, I guess, level of each one of these to get to celebrate. And that's honestly, that's what a lot of research, and those are just not pulled out of the hat, but they're very much of what the brain goes through in order. Okay. So here's a little diagram of like a little bit of between panic and anxiety. It's just a visual for you. We're not going to get into it too much. I do a lot of this in the anxiety program, but today we're talking about kiddos. But we also need to have some clarity on our own anxiety if we're dealing with kiddos, whatever that is, if you're a parent or a teacher or a caregiver or whatever. We have to have understanding of our own anxiety and our own stress and our own connections and control. Because if we can't do that, then how in the world are we supposed to help celebrate and close out like emotional regulation with the kid? So that's just a little bit of that. So if you've seen this slide before, it's in multiple workshops, of course, because I made it many, many years ago, and it's something that has to be understood about self-talk. So this is just about the frontal lobes again. 5 flutter freezes back here. The frontal lobes is where we reason and self-talk and have celebration and a reward system, and we can organize our thoughts and self-talk our way through something. Now, there's 4 basic reasons why we can't do that. So we have to understand this, because if a kiddo doesn't have as much self-talk as other kiddos, then that's a problem. We have to coach them and help them find that, because they're not going to self-soothe if they can't self-talk. Okay, we're going to go through that. Self-soothe, if you can't self-talk and say, oh, I need to take a break right now. I need to go get my bear. I need to get a drink. I need to talk to the teacher. I need to, so that's all self-talk. And then telling yourself or your being to take a break, to do all those things, to self-soothe, to help control your physical reaction a little bit, right? If you're not self-talking, you're going to have the feeling and going straight to the behavior, and it's going to keep spinning, and you have a thought, a feeling, and a behavior. That's how the brain works 100%. So that's the cycle, and it keeps going and keeps going. So you're going to reason with yourself, then that's self-talk. If you need reasoning, like, oh, wait, that's just a noise. Oh, that's this. So especially with highly sensitive people, this is really, really important, because if you can't self-soothe because you're not self-talking, you're not going to self-regulate. Okay. So real quick, the reasons why we don't self-talk is we're in fight, flight, or freeze. We're just in survival brain, which is an anxiety alarm for your self, stress response to do something fast, keeps us alive. We need it. It's really important. Burnout, you're just burned out. You don't have the energy to self-talk. You're in true chronic burnout, or habitual burnout, it's called. It's the last one where you've been in long-term burnout for more than 2 years. If you're impaired, so a child, you, an adult, it doesn't matter, you're impaired with a substance. It blocks the frontal lobes, so you don't have as much reasoning. That's in all kinds of drugs, straight drugs, illegal drugs, alcohol, and prescription drugs. And if you have a mental disorder, for example, autism, we don't have as much reasoning, and we don't have as much processing. So here's focus and here's processing, the frontal lobes. And a kid that has a little ADHD or autism, they don't have as much focus or processing. So autism is like more processing. So you can't process things. So you're not self-talking as much. And so that is an issue, right? Okay. Yes, fight, flight, or freeze. It's abbreviated down here because that's just, yeah. So any kind of fight, flight, or freeze, it's like, I'm going to fight, or I'm going to freeze, I'm going to shut down. It's also aggressive or passive. So you'll see those on some of my slides. What fight is aggressive, and what freeze is being passive. So those go together, just being in relationships. You're going to be aggressive or you're going to be passive, and that is also fight, flight, or freeze response system that goes into that just naturally. Normally, we want to get out of those. And that's why we do some self-soothing, some self-talk to get out of your back of the brain and start reasoning up here and get back organizing your thoughts and what your behavior is going to be, instead of punching, after you punch a wall or before you punch a wall. It's like, you got to have self-talk before or after, both. Before, hopefully, before, punching a wall. But then, so when a kiddo is really angry and they're punching a wall, they have skipped over all of this, right? Very quickly. And they just go straight into fight, flight, or freeze. Make sense? Questions on that? So grief and trauma, anxiety, stress, that all hijacks the frontal lobes, okay? It hijacks them because your body goes into survival. Like, we don't care about everything else. We need to just survive right now. So the brain gets really quite hijacked. The body does. And that's when you have a physiological response. Okay, so let's define anxiety. just the basics, right? This is what's normal. Worry is normal. Anxiety is normal to a point over here, and you just worry, right? You worry about the future. Anxiety is mostly future driven. So PTSD, OCD, is past driven, but future driven is worry. So it's like, okay, this is normal. It's mild distress. It keeps us moving. It keeps us safe. We worry about things. We can control it to a point. So after 10 minutes, you're like, wait, let's wait about, let's worry about that another time. I'm not going to worry about that tomorrow. And you self-talk, right? So you're still in that window of tolerance that you can self-talk, and you can give a solution to the situation, because remember, you're reasoning and self-talking, and you can control that to a point, right? Once it jumps over to out of the window of tolerance, you're in severe distress. Your physical body's reacting. You have a mental imagery that's not so good. It's negative, or it's future driven. It's really bleak and dark and whatever. It's not controllable at that point anymore. The blocking process. So that means that you're blocking. It starts blocking. So like I said, this frontal lobe is blocked. Impairment does that. Burnout does that. Fight or flight does that. So you don't have, this is blocked. And so you're not processing, and you go into perfectionism a lot of the times. So your personal functioning isn't totally impaired. That means in all areas, by the way. It's not just like, oh, I have a little bit here and there. I have this, I have that. It is really impaired in multiple areas, okay? Now, ruminating, as I talk about this in the anxiety program, I call this marinating. So let's just do a little visual real quick, because time goes really fast with this. And I'm on slide, whatever. And I got lots more. So just imagine your ribs. How do you marinate some ribs? You soak them for 2 or 3 days, right? And you're soaking some meat, right? And you just marinate. And you think that the longer you go, the better they are. But after a certain amount of time, do they get any better? No, they don't, by the way. They just don't. You just got to cook them. So you keep waiting for something better. You keep thinking that things are going to get better when you cook them. It's not going to help. It's not going to really do that. So ruminating is over and over again, and it's time. It's extended time of ruminating the same scene over and over again. And it's thinking errors. It's automatic, they're called ants, automatic negative thoughts. They're narratives, they're negative cognition narratives. So if you have a narrative about a story that's negative, that is not true, then those all can play into ruminating, okay? So think of this list and think, okay, which one am I doing? I'm not controlling it. I'm going into perfectionism, or my personal functioning is impaired in certain spots. Now, this is just you, this is your kiddo, it's anything. So just think of, okay, which ones am my kid feels completely out of control. Yeah, and then they're processing blocks. It just blocks. It's like a big bulldozer that just wiped it out. So it's in most areas in the body. So everything in the body is connected, right? And the vagus nerve. So cognitive, emotional, behavioral, and and physiological, they're all connected. So when we have anxiety, this all is, when we have true anxiety, these all have to be part of it. It's not just one. You don't just have bad habits that come up. That's not anxiety. That's compulsion. Okay? Compulsion is different than anxiety. So if you just have a bad habit that comes up and you start biting your nails again, that's just a behavior. That's not anxiety. So it has to be emotional, cognitive, and physiological. Doing something subconsciously, like biting your nails, is not anxiety, because you're just doing it and you don't even realize it. Your body's not activated as much. You're not having, headaches, or you're not shaking, or you're not getting dizzy, or, while you're not breathing heavy while you're biting your nails. It actually is a self-soothing, self-harm behavior.
Hey, Carol, I got a question. from someone. They said, how do we create more self-talk? Is lack of self-talk a possible sign of high functioning autism?
Yes, that's a yes. And I'm not going to diagnose your kiddo with high functioning, autism, but it is a huge. So that you think, well, wait, they're self-talking. They're always ruminating about the same thing. They're very rigid, right? So it's like, well, they're self-talking. No, they're not processing. They're not processing that maybe I should get off this game and do something else because I should probably just go outside and play or do my homework no, they can't process after that point. So they're not self-talking for their well-being, right? So they get very rigid. And there's lots of signs to autism of those kind of things. But yes, and so we have to look at that. It's also a function of highly sensitive kiddos, which we're going to talk about. There's so many other things going on than just, but we call everything, and I'm doing it in quotes, and I say this a million times, we call everything anxiety. And that's okay. We need it. Remember, we need clarity first. So we just label it, which is 90% of it. Let's label it. Okay, it's anxiety. But is it? So, we can educate ourselves on that. So this is what we're going to watch for, okay? In some of the nervous system, and this is what it really does to the immune system. It really crashes our immune system when we're in this cycle. So these are some of the excessive worry and sadness, eating habits, sleeping habits. If you could do anything, I always, my number one is sleep. So if you haven't visited the YouTube channel for Blomquist, of course, go on there. Sleeping versus, so power struggles. There's a kiddo sleeping workshop, and then there's also Why We Sleep. That's my favorite. If we can do one thing to reduce any symptoms of anxiety and depression or anything else, the number one thing that you can do to get rid of that is sleep good. That's scientific. Sleeping problems cause anxiety, cause focus issues, cause depression, cause gut issues, causes immune system issues, a whole bunch of things. So it's number one is sleep. So that's the best thing that you can do to start is difficulty concentrating, avoidance of activities, and of course body pain, right? And then the increased use of alcohol, tobacco, or drugs. So these are just signs to look at. They're just signs. So these things to watch for are also many signs of symptoms of abuse. Well, trauma, okay? So any kind of trauma that's happened, which is bullying, which is home trauma, which is, developmental trauma, any kind of abuse for sure, neglect, you're gonna have every kind of possible part of the body react when there's trauma going on. And bullying is huge. I'm doing the bullying conference next month. That you're going to have all these things. So this is the same list actually almost for bullying, to watch for bullying. So it's like, oh wait, I don't want to sleep, I don't want to eat, I don't want to go to school for school performance or avoiding school. That's all a sign of bullying at school too. Okay, so what fuels the fire, right? So here's anxiety. Fight, flight, or freeze is your natural alarm system to anxiety. That now a safety behavior, like I kind of mentioned, pushes you into fearful thoughts and back and forth. So here's your safety behavior. Oh, I avoid school. And then I have fearful thoughts, and then I avoid school, and then I'm going to get teased at school. Then I have safety behavior. So a safety behavior is avoiding going to school or saying I'm sick so I don't have to go to school. So we're avoiding. So safety behaviors sound good, but they're an avoidance. So that's what the more we have safety behaviors, the more the fire gets bigger and the more it fuels it. So the more we avoid. So when we get to healthy coping skills for highly sensitive kids, and anxiety is the biggest thing that we have to do is tolerate fear, tolerate scary things, and face them, but with management, with a little bit of rules, right? So I'll explain that. So it's not just like we're going to jump into the fire, like jump in all, both feet first and go, oh, I'm just going to do this, the hardest thing I've ever done in my life, and think that I'm not going to die. Well, you might think that, but you probably won't. Let's see, to see signs of another child who seems happy but is doing many of these things. Yeah. I'm just reading the chat there. Yeah, true. So a little bit about rewiring. Okay. The point is the only point that you even need to know here is neuroscience has now proven that we can rewire and change the brain. Okay. And this takes time. That's why we do therapy. That's why we do exposure therapy. That's why I do EMDR, because that process, that fear circuit, can be replaced with something else. That's why we want to do things that scare us, because we have to do it and say, oh my gosh, I didn't die. Let's celebrate. Let's go get a Slurpee, So I always call that Slurpee Day. Everything is a celebration, a complete meltdown, a complete, something really risky. We have to celebrate and reward ourselves after we do it. So our brain says, oh my gosh, I want to do that again. I'm motivated to do it again. The only way that you're ever motivated to do it again is if you were rewarded. Now, that's not just praise. I don't condone praise, because it's not really a reward. Like, so you praise the child and praise the child and praise the child, and then oh, I want to do that again. That feels good. The praise doesn't last. So we have to say, okay, here's my response. My brain says that I don't want to do it because it's scary. And that's what you're going to wire together. And then it just goes on for life. So when you have a phobia, agoraphobia of something, that's what your brain's telling you, big time. You're scared of that, your thing. You're scared of that thing. You're scared of that thing, and you can't face that thing. And then when parents hold down a kid when they're getting a shot or doing something that they're totally terrified of, it actually causes some trauma. It really does. In the long run, though, it's like, okay, let's get to the point where we can do that without having severe trauma when we're doing it, like holding down a kid. But it's like, okay, we're going to just have to do this. This is something that has to be done. So this is where we go into attachment. Okay, going to shift gears just a little bit. Just 5 minutes on attachment. If you don't understand attachment, please learn about it. There's lots of books, but this is basic attachment. I have a workshop on it already. And then how to heal your inner child is a good one on our YouTube channel, because it talks about if you were emotionally neglected as a child, how to get through your wounded childhood. Because attachment, really quickly, is just about your caregivers and how they responded and bonded with you 0 to 3, and then there's some form between 3 and 6. Okay, and that forms your brain. It's actually a brain forming of your attachment bonding in that period of time that produces your anxiety or anxious or avoidant or a secure attachment. And so you can see, like, here's secure, and here's what anxious looks like. It has so much to do with attachment. So you can be disorganized. So you can have an anxious or an avoidant attachment also, which is disorganized, is in the middle. So you can bounce back and forth between, depending on what your adult self is, which I'll just go into that now. He suggests, so Bowlby, the founder of attachment, that attachment also serves to keep the infant close to mother, thus improving the child's chances of survival. It's a survival thing. It's totally a survival thing. Think about 0 to 3, how much trust you put into your caregiver during that time. And your brain actually forms differently if you don't have trust that builds. So this is what happens. Here's an anxious child, and then here's us, and then here's a parent. which is both of us, adults and it's most of us. So it's like, okay, so what does this look like, right? Is this you? You have to know your own current attachment style. Now the key word is current. Those attachment styles can change. You can completely improve to a secure attachment. I've done it. I've seen it. I teach this myself. So it's like, here's this attachment style, but then here's this one with the right people as an adult. But you want to really improve your attachment with the kiddo. That's a teacher or a caregiver or a biological parent. So when that's messed up, a child has all kinds of issues in their childhood. It looks like trauma at most, right? So, and then you end up being over involved, a hovering parent, a helicopter parent, or, if you're an avoidant attachment, then you're going to be an avoidant parent. Okay.
Hey, I had another question come in. They said,
Yes.
what is your next step if you identify that your child is moving past self-talk consistently to FFF and says, I don't know, when they move into FFF state?
So what do you mean when they say, I don't know? Like, so if you're asking lots of questions, it will push your child into fight, flight, or freeze. You will push your child into fight, flight, or freeze because questions cause children to move to fight, flight, or freeze into a stress response brain. Is that what they meant, he or she? So it's like, what's wrong? Or
They said like they don't know why they're moving into FFF.
yes. Well, good, because nobody does. That's the key point of keeping a kid out of into self-regulation, is to not ask the question, why are you doing this, or why are you feeling sad, or why are you crying, or why are you throwing a fit, or why, the word why. They don't know, and I don't know, and you don't know. So you ask the question, because the minute you say, why are you doing this, or why are you sad today, or why are you throwing a fit, why don't you want to do the dishes, why are you throwing a fit, because we're doing the, because I just asked you to do the dishes. It's like, they don't know. I don't know. The kid doesn't know. So we ask the kid, and that just puts them into more panic because they don't know. Because it could be a billion things. Think about it. And I always do this in the anxiety program. We're like, okay, name off a billion things of why you just start crying. Do we know why we start crying? Do we really know why? We could have an idea of what's going on. So my question is always, what's going on? It's a statement. It's not a question. What's going on right now? And I'm going to emotionally coach that kid and say, what's going on? It seems like, so you say what's going on in your mind, and you say, okay, what's going on? It seems like you're crying. It seems like you're really upset. And you start emotionally coaching them. And so if you need more of that, there's an emotional coaching webinar, and I talk about that in a minute in like a couple slides. So yeah, we don't know why. So the minute you ask a question of any kind, you're going to get a kid to go into more of a fight, flight, or freeze. So the anxiety program is what I teach continuously for adults. I have done a teen version. Haven't had much response with the teen version. I get a lot of dropout, I am funny. And I do try to keep them engaged, but they're just like not having it. Over Zoom, right? It's kind of hard. So the anxiety program, you can sign up for free. It runs for 5 weeks. I just started it yesterday. So their new one will start in, I want to say the end of October, but maybe not. I can't remember where, because I have to do it in between holidays. I try to go right in between holidays so we don't hit a holiday. So it might be in November, the end of October to November till like Thanksgiving time. And then we won't do it in December because it's too crazy. But so it's just, it goes through 5 weeks of everything. So you can sign up on our website. Hopefully it will be better to sign up better this time. But you can sign up in the same place in the workshops. It's the same, it's under workshops. And the emotional coaching webinar is just, if someone wants to find the YouTube channel link, it's just go to YouTube and put in Blomquist Hill and you'll see all of our videos. And you can put in the little search like emotions, and you'll probably come up with probably 8 or 9 of my emotional intelligence, emotional coaching a teen, how to be emotional intelligence, part 1, part 2, emotional regulation. I have all of those already done, and they're just free workshops that you can watch. Okay. So if you don't ask the student why when they're having fun, then how do you stop it? And more importantly, prevent from regularly hitting that zone. So we don't, that's the thing, is we're not trying to stop it, but we're trying to manage it. And so, yes, there is some preventive things, don't get me wrong. There's lots of things, and I'm going to have that slide in a minute about how to prevent you going to a 10. So I always do 1 to 10. So a 7, you're still self-talking, by the way, okay? You're still self-talking at a 7. At 7.5 and 8, you're not self-talking anymore. 9, 10, and 11 out of 10 is like throwing up and leaving the classroom. So a kid gets so overwhelmed that they have to leave the classroom and then they go throw up in a garbage can, which happens. So that's an 11 for me. So after 7, 8, 9, 10, so if a kid says I'm at a 5 and I'm getting to a 6, and you're helping them stay under a 7, because we don't need them to go to a 10 right now, then you can do some things. But breathing after 7, doing all the, the coping stuff doesn't work, because the brain has already gone into survival of fight, flight, or freeze. So all you can do is sit in their space and sit with them as much as possible. If you're talking about a small kiddo, or having someone help them be in a safe place, or just in a calm place for a minute to have a meltdown. And I allow that because our body is needing that for some reason. So we have highs and lows and meltdowns. And I mean, so for example, when I had 25 foster kids live with me over a 10-year period, we celebrated meltdowns. I didn't stop them because it was needed for trust. No child is going to completely melt down and completely have a complete explosion of emotions unless they're safe. They don't do that with their teachers, most likely. We've had some the last couple of years, but they won't do it in front of a crowd they don't know. They'll try to hold it in as much as possible. And then when they get home, they explode. I've had so many kids in the last 2 years, the parents come in and say, the minute they get in the car, the minute they get home, they have an extreme meltdown every time after school. And I'm like, well, that's because you're the safe person to do that with. So you're just gonna have to do that. Now, with that said, here's my bar, and here's everybody's bar. Here's the law: domestic violence, kicking someone, hitting a wall, throwing something, that is not acceptable. So that's when we have to say, that's not okay. You can't hit your head on the wall. You can't kick the wall. You can't kick your brother. You can't throw something at me. So here's that. And that's pretty, and that's, if anyone's doing that, they need to be in play therapy. If they're under 10, play therapy, or just therapy in itself, but that's the bar. We can't, then there is this book when we get to that stage. So this is beyond consequences, logic and control. So if that's where your kiddo's at and they get to that, they're getting to 11s, because anytime you're hurting yourself, that is an 11. Throwing up is an 11 out of 10. We are way past SP. It's not a disorder, but it's a label now that we have as a highly sensitive person. Okay. So if you've not heard of this, you can look up Erin. I did that combined there. Ted Zeff or Julie Rosenthien, I think. Yeah. And so my person that I've read the most from and I have her book on highly sensitive couples, is Elaine Aron. And I have this, their names at the bottom of this slide right here, but I have all of the books referenced in the back of this. If you haven't ever seen these workshops, I always have all the references in the back, and you're going to get this PowerPoint. So let's go through some of these. You experience everything in an oversized way. So there's a point in my life where you can say this, I was very sensitive, highly sensitive. I had a lot more immune system issues. I had really sensitive to smells. I was low tolerance in stress or situations, right? Social situations as a child, horrible. I'm not that way. I have overcome the highly sensitive person in those situations, right? And I went through the list when I did this and read through her stuff again. And you go to her website. There's her, I'm talking about Elaine Aron. You can go through lists and you can kind of pick it out. You can say, wow, my kid's got, 17 out of 22. Well, then this kiddo is a highly sensitive kiddo. And we call those a gift. They are gifts, okay? But this is what happens in our surroundings, in our environment. We don't accept these gifts. We actually cause them by putting them in loud spaces and really bad light and really bad chemical smells. And we are overstimulated by our immune system and allergies. So the big key here is I have had so many kiddos come into my office and they're like, my kid's they're empathetic. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. They're empathetic. They take in everybody's emotions, and they're the ones that rescue everyone when they have big feelings, and they have lots of empathy, but they just rescue everybody. I'm like, that's a highly sensitive kiddo. They absorb everybody else's emotions, but they also are very creative and observant. And sometimes they're labeled as timid or shy because they're very, very observant. They actually don't just react. They don't react first, they reflect first. So they're doing tons of little self-talks up here, and they're observant, and they're reflecting and reflecting and reflecting. And so that's exhausting too, because they stay in that for so long. And then they absorb everybody's emotions, and they're very, very empathetic, but they notice everything. But the biggest thing out of all this is their stimuli of senses are overstimulated. So they're very, very stimulated by smells, taste, sound, sight. Food allergies is huge. But see, all of this, think about an autistic kiddo. Are they all of this? Absolutely, like a lot. So think about it. If you have any kind of high functioning or an autistic kiddo, think about how sensitive they are. They're going to have this combined with the autism. So they have highs and lows and big emotions and meltdowns because they don't self-talk and regulate. But really with highly sensitive is they don't take breaks like they're supposed to, right? Because they don't know how to do that. And of course, they just don't like, I don't know who likes to watch violence and cruelty, but I don't. But that's me. I can't watch a movie with that in it. But so with kids, it's like, no, you can't do that. Any questions on this list? Yeah, so signing up for the anxiety program is the next anxiety program. Looking at the chat again, is not listed yet. So watch for it in October. And Heather usually sends out emails to your work email to your work for your employer of all of the upcoming new workshops. So yeah, right now the next one's not up yet. So keep checking back. So this is how, so back to this. to a little bit of how we cope with highly sensitive people, how we cope, how we can help our kiddos cope. Okay. So you have to go back to you. I always say, go back to us, go back to your soul and say, okay, how am I highly sensitive? What really bothers me? What stresses me out? What smells give you a headache? Like chemical smells, sometimes very sensitive. Your gut is very sensitive. You have allergies, things like that. So some of that is like, it's not necessarily hereditary, but it's like your environment. When you are stressed out, your child learns how to be stressed out because of that thing. Say you're late, you don't like to be late, so that you're stressed out when kids are late or when people are late. So then your child learns that that's a stressful situation when we're late. So guess what? Change is horrible, and lateness and an off routine is really hard for highly sensitive people. Well, sounds like anxiety too, right? Anybody that has anxiety, we want to have a routine, we want to have a plan, and then when that plan doesn't work, though, how do we cope? How do we deal with that stress? Do we take a time out? Do we do a downtime? Do we get a distraction going? Do we just have a radical acceptance of a little bit of a growth mindset to say, hey, things happen. We're going to get through it. Yep. Traffic's bad. We're going to get, okay, we're going to have to turn on the radio and we're going to have to, tell someone that we're going to be late. Or do you freak out, and the child freaks out because change is really, really hard. Okay. So biggest thing
Real quick,
about highly sensitive.
Can you hear me, Carol?
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm not trying to cut you off. I just keep getting questions.
Right.
First one, I don't know if you answered it. Someone's talking about your anxiety group and that it's not listed on the workshop page.
Yeah, I just answered that.
Okay, yeah. And I don't know what you said, but if you still want to join that one that's going on now, if you're fine with it, Carol, they can just email me and I can send them the link too.
You're right. So after you miss the first week, I'm okay with you jumping in the second week and just email me at caryl@blumquistel.com. So at the beginning of this website has my email, and you can say, hey, send me the first week's PowerPoint so I can go over it. And then I'm going to jump into week 2, 3, 4, 5, and just plan on being in all 5 Mondays at 5:30 if you're going to do it, though. If you can't do it, wait and plan on it,
And then the other question was, how can you tell if a child is able to self-talk?
If they can self-regulate. So you don't ask questions, you're stating something like, it seems like you're not doing okay. And so he's like, I'm not doing okay. Yeah, I'm crying and I'm throwing a fit, or I'm shaking, or I'm having anxiety about tomorrow. Seems like, and I'm not, or, he's wrestling in his bed, he can't sleep. And so you can then say, okay, well, what are you thinking about that? Are you thinking about something? You can kind of coach and help them self-talk, and then we can get to the self-soothing. But that's a good question, because it's like, okay, how do we know? If if a child gets up from the meltdown and takes themselves to their room and gets their blanket or their book or their favorite, Snuggie, and just lays on their bed and self-soothes, that's self-talk, because they did that on their own. They said, oh my gosh, okay, I'm okay now. I'm just going to go to my room. And they did that on their own, or they asked for help. That's self-talk. If they said, hey, mom, can you help me? Or can but if you go in and try to fix it, that's not emotional coaching, and you will fail if you try to fix it. If you try to fix their emotions, if you try to change their emotions, we're just emotionally coaching and meeting them right here. And that's really emotional coaching. That's a whole book by John Gottman, How to Raise an Emotionally Intelligent Child. My top 5, that book will never leave my top 5, along with his other. I have a top 5 that's really a top 10, but they're really top 5 books out of hundreds. And Gottman's in that top 5, of course, but he's got 2 that are in my top 5. So let me see. Which book? How to how to raise an emotionally intelligent child of Gottman, and it's in the back of this PowerPoint. And it's how to emotionally coach. Yeah. So going back to earlier to a chat about rewarding kids. So I have a kid who was 9 who was afraid of shower bath by himself, by herself. How would we celebrate reward? Oh my gosh, this is like perfect textbook. It's like, so self-talk, scared of water. So that's a sensitivity. Again, go back to highly sensitive. Water or being by yourself is a highly sensitive situation, right? So it's not just being by themselves, it's shower or bath too. It's water. That's a tough one because that's on the list for sure of signs, right? But being by themselves, so we have social anxiety and separation anxiety, we call it. It's not that. It's feeling trapped. So it's a phobia. See, it's a phobia. It's not anxiety about being separated from someone. It's a phobia. So we have to treat the phobia. And you come in, I could do 2 sessions with you or 1 session with her, even over Zoom, but it's really hard. I'm in Orem, and then you go over that and then you practice it before. So you start celebrating. You always do some practicing before the shower or the bath, because this is a need that has to be done. Just like brushing your teeth and going to the dentist or a vaccination when they're small kids and they're afraid of the doctor, right? So those are things that have to be done. Shower and bath has to be done. It's also a power room, because your bedroom, bathroom, kitchen are power rooms. So your bathroom, and I guarantee you she has sleep issues, and I guarantee you she has food issues. I almost guarantee that out of that 9-year-old, because those are your 3 power rooms. So she is feeling powerless. So you have to give back her power. And if she has a twin, that's even the same. It's like, yeah, but we're at the stage now where you're not going to be with your twin when you go to the bathroom, when you eat, when you go out to call, so we have to start doing the safety behaviors, right? Eliminating them. We have to stop doing the safety behaviors. So we have to practice it. So writing about it, coloring about it, practicing it in their head before it happens. And then celebrate, reward. They come up with a chart. And then when they do it on their own, they build up and they choose the reward. So it's always just, it's not a consequence, it's a reward, because there is no consequence to that, because she's scared to death. So this is some things she can do. So we have to have a routine. Number 1, you have to distract, not avoid. So we're going to do distractions. We're going to have fun time in the bath. We're going to the dollar store. We're going to have lots of distractions to keep her in her frontal lobes. Avoidances, fight, flight, or freeze. Distract is up here. And then we're going to manage that stress. Then you're going to write about it. You're going to speak up, celebrate with the gifts. These are gifts that are sensitive, right? That she can speak up. And then you got to rule out other things. So you got to rule out autism. You got to rule out severe anxiety disorders, and you have to rule out phobias. And then get treatment. You need that. And here we are. That's what we're here for. It's great because this modality provides treatment for families, because family therapy isn't covered with insurance. You have to have a diagnosis. Okay, so we've got 7 minutes, kinda. So we'll hurry here. So this is just some signs. They're just signs. Everything is a sign to the body and to the soul. So you just have to realize that a secondary emotion is a sign of control issues, a sign of fear, a sign that, she is overloaded. Her brain is overloaded when she's scared. Okay, good example. So the first thing we do is process those. What secondary emotions is she having? Go through measurement and management, right? And that's my slide that has works. I remember this. I don't know what happened with one of those slides. Okay, so I've talked about emotional coaching. This is just one slide that I have on multiple workshops, but the whole PowerPoint on emotional coaching is on YouTube already. So it goes through each step of these, and I go through each one. My favorite one is setting limits, problem solving according to your family values. And there's 5 steps in step 5. So just watch for that. By the way, someone just asked about the recording. Heather will send it to you by Friday or Monday or so. She'll send you this recording. Then she just puts this whole recording on YouTube, so you can watch it later, but you're going to get this PowerPoint too. But I put most of my PowerPoints on my own website too, and my own I have a website that I have lots of workshop and handouts that I've done from years before, and I have handouts on my own website, and that's Paperback Connections with an s.com. I can chat that if you want. Paperback Connections, and then you can print them. So this is your toolbox. Okay, ready? Let's get to skills here. This is my favorite thing. With as a certified play therapist and sanitary therapist and several other things. I mean, these are all things that we can do very easily, and it gives back the child some power. So feelings back. You make it red, blue, happy, sad, red, green, yellow, whatever, right? According to the sense that they're having and the emotion that they're having. And we've got to have all 5 senses in that bag. So it's a dollar store run, right? It's a bag with all 5 senses in it. So for example, it's got something to suck on because it has flavor and it has smell. And so taste is one of the biggest things we forget. It will help you get right back to your frontal lobes immediately. Think about smell. When you put lavender oil under your nose, or you have some peppermint oil and you put it on, one of the best things you can do to calm your nervous system immediately. So those are little bags that you have in the car, in their backpack. They have everything with them and a granola bar. And so they can always feel like they're in control. And then they take it with them. And they have 2 hanging in their room. One's a sad bag and one's an angry bag. Okay. So when you're sad, you get this bag and you go play with it. When you're angry, you get this bag and you can squeeze that ball and you get the Play-Doh and throw it against the wall. Great. It's actually not technically therapeutic to cause, when you're angry, to invoke anger, but that's, so just disclaimer there, but squeezing it, right? So things like that. Box container. Okay, so you're going to make a box with your kiddo and you're going to get a container. I mean, you get a little open container and everything in there is things to self-soothe you. So if it's just a piece of paper that says, go take a hot bath, go for a walk, get your book, get your Snuggie, whatever. And so they don't have to self-talk. Guess what? You have it in a container because they're not self-talking for themselves. So this is perfect, because a highly sensitive kiddo or an anxious kiddo is not going to be able to make decisions. They can't make decisions. So if you come sweeping in and make them for them, it will backfire on you. Backfire bad. Because what you're doing is you're saying, you can't self-soothe yourself. You can't make decisions. So I'm going to make them for you. And I'm going to tell you that you need to go to your room. Oh, worst thing you could do. So they're going to go get their bag, or you can help them have 2 choices. You can say, hey, do you want to go get your bag, or do you want to go, pick a self-soothing activity out of your jar? Or you can make a jar and they worry about things, right? They write them down and they put those things in the jar. Now that's a kid that's a 7 or under, because he's still self-talking at that point. He can say, oh, I'm worried about this. I'm going to start a worry jar and I'm going to put it from here inside me out here. So that's why writing stuff down or coloring is one of the best things you can do. Now, as a therapist, I've had in my training, in one of my certifications in trauma training that I just recently did, he had a great idea for kiddos. So a kiddo sends a worry letter, a trauma letter, something that they've had, something that's been horrible, something that they're worried about. They can write it down and they actually mail it to him, to his PO box. And then someone said, well, can they scan it and email it to the therapist? And I said, and he's like, yeah, absolutely. So see, anything that we can do to get it out of us and send it to somebody. Music collection, list of distractions. So these are 10-minute activities that you can write down and a kiddo can go pick up out of his container or box, right? So a self-soothing activity, a distraction, like I said, go jump on the tram for 10 minutes and then you set the timer. You go get a book, you go call grandma. You know, those are all good distractions, and you've got to plan ahead for strong emotions. But the biggest thing with highly sensitive or anxious kids is change, because it has to do with control. The brain is very confused when they're out of control. Okay, so this is just a list. You're gonna have to research this. That's in your, I just always add some of this because I am a certified integrated medicine provider for mental health. It's a long one. So there's some additive supplements, and I don't have time to go over them, but here is the list of books and resources. So this is just the books that I use with this kind of subject. Okay, there's Gottman, Raising an Emotionally Intelligent Child. Lots of Siegel, if you want to have brain stuff and helping the child's brain, strategies for nurturing your child developing mind. Huge. He's really in my top 10 authors. Mindset, I talked about a little bit, like how to change your mindset into a growth mindset, emotional intelligence. But here's the books for highly sensitive parenting. That's hers, Elaine Aron, right there. And she's the one I have read about the most, okay? So I have her other book that's highly sensitive couples, because I do lots of couples work. Okay, so right time. So how else? How else? I don't know what I just said that for. Let's see. What else is what I meant. What else do we need here? I don't know why I have scribbles on my screen. I don't know how that happens. So here's just the 10 books about highly sensitive parenting. And then I think the biggest thing is really investigating how sensitive you are to anxiety or stress too, and senses and emotions and empathy. So anything else? Any other comments that came in? I do on my website, I talk about my books, and this is, so paperback, I'll just type it in, connections.com is my own website. And I talk about my hundreds of books. Yeah, and my email at Blomquist is carol@blomquisttail.com. Anything else? Carol.com.
Did you see the question? Can schools reliably test for autism? Is it better to go to a pediatrician? Did you see that one?
Okay, so no, neither one. So no, schools do not do anything with autism. They will do behavioral checks for an IEP, or you're really doing a 504 at that point. So it's getting on a list that actually assesses for autism, and through your insurance, it's not going to be covered most likely, and things like that. And usually my average that I hear is 6 to 9 months to get on that list. And you have to, and so if you want any autism, I have a whole list of like where to get those assessments done, and it's not, and your pediatrician can refer you. So yeah, you say, hey, if my kiddo is having some symptoms, and yes, your pediatrician can refer you, but you're not going to get an assessment through a pediatrician. You need a full assessment, to rule out. And so ADHD medication, that's a tough one, because we know that if it depends on if there is really an ADHD brain going on, because if medication is always going to be an increase of a stimulant. So it's gonna, for normally it would increase your dopamine, but ADHD medicine is supposed to drop your dopamine if you have a true ADHD brain. So like, normal is like, oh, here's caffeine. It would stimulate most people. An ADHD brain a little bit, it would bring you down a little bit. So you'd actually focus better with a little caffeine, a little stimuli. So that's why I just use their GABA is a neurotransmitter that's we use in the integrated medicine world. In my world, we use supplements. So they don't have side effects in that way, but so I would just get, if your child, so the thing is let me just say this about ADHD. It mirrors 14 disorders. It mirrors, it's almost exact to anxiety, trauma, developmental issues, highly sensitive kiddo. So yes, we can call everything anxiety, we can call everything ADHD. There's a little bit of my philosophy. No one focuses when you are in your fight, flight, or freeze brain. You do not self-talk. Does that mean a kiddo has ADHD? Absolutely not. There's just stressors going on around in our environment so high now that we're just on this high alert all the time. But yes, there is kiddos that have a really hard time with this. Well, there's supplements also for helping focus, right? But it's also getting to the root. What is the issue that the child has a really hard time with, focusing on something, right? But if the key here is every environment, every single environment all the time, and it's an all the time. So if summer, the kiddo does okay, or at home he does okay, or at church he does okay, or with grandma he does okay, then what's going on? He's having stressors about school. And 90% of that could be, a lot of times it's some kind of bullying. So it's not ADHD at all.